4.0. Yeah. So Pharma 4.0 is more than a digitization. It it's about creating an intelligent, connected, and agile pharmaceutical ecosystem that integrates the automation, AI, IoT, and advanced analytics to every stage of product lifecycle. So this shift moves us from traditional reactive processes to proactive and predictive operations, whether it is a drug development or manufacturing or regulatory compliance or post marketing monitoring. Real world evidence plays a crucial role here. It fuels AI driven insights, supports faster regulatory decisions, enhances patient centric design, and enables continuous improvement through real time feedback. So, today, we will explore how patient data has evolved and how integrated evidence planning helps us to bring together the clinical, real world data and digital data for better outcomes. So let's dive into how AI and data are transforming healthcare into something smarter and more patient centric. So moving on to the next slide, the organizers were myself and my boss, Louis Hendrick, who is the founder and CEO of Global Value Web with over 30 years of experience enabling global value chains. So at GVW, we align our services with principles of Pharma 4.0, helping organizations to leverage real world data, integrate them to modern data standards, and move towards smarter and insight driven decision making. Thank you, Louis, for sponsoring this webinar. And on the next slide, we have our speakers, Mr. Mark from Global Value Web, Mr. Amrutanshu Kumar from Novartis, and Dr. Anita Umesh from Genentech. Thank you for accepting our invite to share your experience, dear speakers. And moving on to the next slide, I would like to start with a journey of patient data. So, by taking a step back and reflecting how far we have come from to the patient data. So, during our early days, everything was on paper and handwritten notes or physical prescriptions. But today, we moved into a digital world where patient information is not just stored, but it is also analyzed, connected, and acted upon. We are now seeing data being generated from many sources like hospital systems, wearables, health applications, pharmacy records, and all of this is helping us to understand the patient better in real time. It is also making patients more aware and involved in managing their own health, which is a big shift from how things were a decade ago. From the perspective of pharma and life sciences, this shift is also more significant. Real world data and real world evidence are no longer a buzzwords, but they are becoming an essential part for clinical development, regulatory submissions, as well as for early discovery. It was really during the pandemic that the importance of RWE and RWD came into the spotlight. We saw how quickly we needed to act and how valuable real world insights could be for policy making, for treatment choices, as well as to understand the patient's outcomes in real time. And on the next slide, we can see how the global initiatives were leading the way. So where we can see the regulatory bodies like USFDA, EMA, Health Canada, and even from India, we are noticing that the value of real world data has been recognized to support decision making. This kind of transformation does not happen in isolation. It's like along with the regulators and global communities. Moving on to the next slide, Veena. So groups like Odyssey, ICODA, Fuse have been playing a major role in building the ecosystem for real world evidence. And I'm so glad to share that our team at GVW has contributed significantly to this journey, especially by helping in establishing the Odyssey India chapter. And we have worked closely with various stakeholders to bring the structure, governance, and values to how patient data is converted into an usable evidence. And why are we here today? That is what we are going to see in the next slide. And yeah, so we are here to talk about how can we create a real and meaningful value in healthcare by using patient data in a much faster way. But how can we do that? It's by bringing up the right processes, people, and technology together to turn the data into a real world evidence. And it is not just one group who does it, but it's a kind of team efforts where each of us were connected to build the patient data into a clear story so that it can support the decisions at every step. And of course, a well connected ecosystem truly puts patients at the center and uses the data very wisely to drive better outcomes. And on the next slide, we are going to discuss about the true digital transformation. So when we talk about true digital transformation, it is not just adopting the new tools or automating the existing processes. It's a shift in mindsets where data, people, process, and technology should come together to drive the purpose led evidence based decisions. Again, in pharma and life sciences, this means turning the journey of patient data into real world evidence that supports faster, safer, and more personalized healthcare. And yes, we should also accept that it's not just about the clinical trials anymore, but it is about how treatments actually work in everyday clinical practice. And so the true digital transformation is not just a local improvement, but it's also part of a global movement to create a more connected, efficient, and patient centric healthcare system. With that, I'm happy to introduce our first keynote speaker, Mr. Mark, director at Global Value Web. And I request Mark to come on stage. Over to you, Mark.
Yes, thank you, Lakshmi, for getting us going. I see there's a poll on the screen. I don't know if that's necessary.
I think it disappeared, Mark. It should
Actually,
disappear now.
it stays on my screen. Anyway, thank you for getting us going. Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. And once again, thank you for joining us. Can you just click through to the next slide, please? And then the next slide, which I'll leave here for a moment. Excited to be here to talk about real world data and real world evidence and how we can move them from buzzwords to real world action. My name is Mark Vorderman. I'm a director at Global Value Web. I reside in the Netherlands, where I'm actually today, and my work area is Europe. 65 years of age, and I began my professional IT journey in 1984, back when real world data was stored in filing cabinets and handwritten logs. My background is, as I always say, to keep it simple, in applied science. I've always been the person who connects business needs with available technology, turning potential into practical operations. Can you click through one more time? Almost on this slide. Yep. So back in 1984, I was working at a company using the latest and best IBM equipment. Yeah, I clearly remember our System 38 with an impressive array of IBM 3370 disk drives, and I will never forget them. They were capable of storing an amazing amount of 750 MB on a disk that had a total weight of 250 kilograms. Here or there you see 4 of them, so that's a ton together. Each of them, with a height of 100 centimeters, a depth of 70 centimeters. If you would compute it to today, a tiny USB stick weighing just a few grams, storing 1.5 terabytes, yeah, you need nearly about 2,000 of these disk drives, to get them on there. And each of them, by the way, at that time, they cost $30,000 each. So this slide really shows how far we have come in just 40 years, which I do believe that's a generation. The real world is messy, complex, and constantly evolving. But it isn't all that different from 40 years ago in spirit. But today, as Lakshmi already mentioned, where data meets daily decisions, real world evidence becomes not just useful, but absolutely essential. Yeah, we are really at a moment in life science industry where digital transformation is no longer aspirational, it's really operational. Yeah? And at the heart of this transformation lies a powerful convergence. Advanced technologies like AI, machine learning, large language model, they are all joining forces with real world data to drive a new level of intelligence in healthcare, accelerating the shift from retrospective analysis into real-time insight and predictive decision making, helping us to uncover hidden patterns in pharmaceutical data, simulate outcomes in drug development, and automate complex regulatory or clinical decisions at scale. But these advancements only create impact when they are grounded in context, and that context is real-world data and real-world evidence. Once considered complementary to clinical trials, real-world evidence is now central. It informs regulatory strategy, post-marketing surveillance, reimbursement. I was just on a conference, also as a speaker in Frankfurt, touching upon this object, and health policy. It brings the richness of actual practice and patient experience into our decision-making frameworks. However, to make this intelligence actionable, we need more than just data or algorithms. We need full life cycle stewardship, clean, contextualized inputs, interoperability across fragmented systems, validated, explainable analytics, and above all, alignment with regulatory and operational realities. This is the point where digital maturity takes a leap from what I call doing digital. And please go to my LinkedIn page. I have several publications on this subject. From doing digital, adding digital tools to legacy processes, to being digital, where operations, governance, and decision making are truly designed around data. Having said that, let me briefly introduce who we are at Global Value Web and how we operate within this environment. In my own words, Global Value Web is a digital enablement company. We help life sciences organizations shift from control by process to control by data, enabling them to lead with trusted, connected, and compliant data across research, development, manufacturing, regulatory, and commercial domains. But what truly differentiates us is how we integrate. We don't just deliver services, we embed ourselves into our clients, and we have plenty of business cases to showcase this. Operational environments absorbing the executional load, relieving daily pressures, and allowing pharma professionals to focus on what matters most: patient care, scientific discovery, and regulatory stewardship. Our work spans the full real-world evidence lifecycle, from OMOP-CDM conversions, for those who don't know the abbreviation, Observational Medical Outcomes Partnership Common Data Model, already mentioned by Lakshmi, OHDSI ecosystem integration, synthetic data generation, feasibility analysis, cohort creation, and decision-ready dashboards via platforms like ARES. We have harmonized over 160 terabytes, and I believe that was just one project of complex health data, bringing clarity to everything from oncology research to market access decisions. But to understand why real-world evidence is now so critical, it helps to briefly reflect on where we came from and how we got there. Next slide, please. Digital transformation in pharma has followed a path, first digitizing paper, then digitalizing workflows, but true transformation, began when we started using data to drive decisions, not just document them. That shift from process-driven to data-driven thinking is the foundation of Global Value Web's philosophy. As we saw in the previous slide with the IBM 3370, a machine the size of a filing cabinet that stored just 750 megabytes, digital transformation didn't happen overnight. It's been a journey shaped by evolving needs, advancing technologies, and rising expectations. We often think of digital transformation as a straightforward sequence: digitalization, and then transformation. But real transformation begins when we start using data, especially real-world data, to drive decisions. Data to drive decisions is actually a subject that I've been deeply involved with for nearly 2 decades. It goes back to 2004 when the FDA introduced process analytical technology and quality by design. Initiatives that placed a strong emphasis on using data as a foundation for smarter, more consistent decision making. From the analytics perspective, we have moved through questions, and if you look at the analytic spectrum vertically is horizontally, of course. What happened? Yeah, that was the first. Yeah, we were printing out boxes of paper back in 1984. We moved to why did it happen? Question, what if, what next, and importantly, how do we act on this insight? That's the evolution from simply doing digital, using digital tools to improve efficiency, to being digital, where processes are designed around digital capabilities to improve effectiveness, or to use our guiding principle from control by process to control by data. Today, digital maturity is no longer optional. It's essential. Without structured, analyzable, and comparable data, the potential of real-world data remains largely untapped. In the next few slides, I will talk you through the increasing importance of real-world evidence in real-world practice. Why it is more than just data, how we build pipelines to turn fragmented information into reliable insight, practical challenges of quality, privacy, global interoperability, and how we apply these principles in real operational context. So, with that, let's begin our journey from retrospective data to real-world decisions. Next slide, please. So the importance of real-world evidence, not just conceptually, but practically. It's no longer a nice to have. It's becoming a core requirement across the healthcare system. Yeah, we have said that already a few times during this session. Whether we're talking about regulatory submission, post-marketing surveillance, health technology assessments, or reimbursement negotiations, real-world evidence is being asked to play a central role. Why? Because it gives us a broader, more representative view of how treatments perform in everyday settings across diverse populations, longer time frames, and real-world variables. We're now in a landscape where decisions must be faster, more personalized, and economically justified. It supports clinical decisions, market access, policy making, and even commercial strategy. Yeah, but unlocking that value takes more than just data. It takes a structured approach, sound methodologies, and the ability to move from information to insight and from insight to impact. But having said that, yeah, it's easier said than done. And I'm quoting Anja Lambrecht, whose article I read at least about 10 years ago. At that time, she was an assistant professor at the London Business School. She said very clearly, and she was very, very right, and it's still right today, data itself has limited value without the tools, skills, and organizational frameworks to unlock this potential. How do we make all of this work in practice? Next slide, please. RWE is evolving from a supportive resource to a central pillar in the healthcare decision. But how does this actually play out in practice? Today, as healthcare systems pivot towards value-based care, regulatory demands grow more sophisticated. Yeah? We need to structure better. Yeah? And actionable RWE is greater than ever. But we still face these persistent challenges: fragmented data sources, inconsistent standards, technical integration hurdles, and evolving regulatory expectations. Yeah. You see enablers like OMOP, I already talked about, FHIR, fast healthcare, interoperability, one of those words I always struggle with, resources, which help us standardize and align data across systems. Yeah. We're seeing the rise of advanced cohort building tools, predictive analytics platforms, and privacy preserving techniques like anonymization and synthetic data generation. Together, these developments allow us to extract insight across the entire analytical spectrum, from what happened, as I mentioned before, all the way to how do we act on this. It's about putting the patient and stakeholder at the center, using RWE to guide decisions that are faster, smarter, and more aligned with real-world needs. At Global Value Up, we've seen this firsthand. Over the last 15 years, we've progressed from simple dashboards to full spectrum predictive models powered by diverse, high-integrity datasets. This evolution gives us the opportunity to bridge science, operations, and policy, all through the lens of real-world data. Ultimately, the value of RWE lies not just in the data itself, Anja Lambrecht, but in how we transform that data into structured insight and then into real-world impact. How do we do that? Next slide, please. So how do we bring all of this together? The structured data, the tools, the methodologies into something that can actually support decisions in the real world. That's where what we call, or is being called, the pipeline comes in. Building a real world evidence pipeline isn't just about gathering more data, it's about transforming diverse, messy, and often incomplete data sets into clean, structured, and reliable evidence that can stand up regulatory, clinical, and commercial scrutiny. A robust pipeline spans several key steps. Data intake, okay, that's logically, collecting the data from various sources, electronic health records, claim systems, registries, and wearables, or social determinants of health. My personal favorite, the non-medical factors that influence a person's health outcomes, uniquely human dimension to healthcare analytics, conditions in which we are born, grow, live, work, and age. From there, we move into the integration and in the harmonization, mapping this data into standardized models like OMOP, CDM, to ensure the interoperability and consistency. This step is absolutely foundational if we want to compare apples to apples across regions, populations, and studies. Next, of course, the analysis, not just the retrospective reporting, but forward-looking capabilities. Building cohorts, generating synthetic populations, running predictive models, simulating outcomes. And this is where advanced data science techniques, including AI and machine learning, begin to unlock deeper insights. And finally, turning insights into intuitive, real-time tools that stakeholders across healthcare can use, from researchers to regulators, clinicians to commercial leaders, visualization and decision support. At Global Value App, we specialize in stitching these elements together, not as separate tasks, but as an integrated pipeline that is scalable, regulatory grade, and built to support the full spectrum of decisions. Because in the end, the strength of your RWE pipeline determines the strength of your decisions. So before I close, I want to briefly acknowledge an essential dimension that we haven't covered in detail today. These are these regulatory challenges that inevitably come with working with the real world data and evidence. From data privacy, interoperability to the validation of AI generated insights. These issues are critical, and I could have a full webinar on this one. But due to the time constraints, we have focused this session on the practical application and enablement of our RWE. That said, regulatory alignment remains a core part of our approach, and we'd be glad to explore it more deeply in the future. Final closing, next slide, please. From my side. Allow me to close on a more personal note with a word from the country I was born in, which is Greece. It's a word that cannot truly be translated into any other language, a concept that has puzzled linguists, poets, and philosophers alike. The word is philotimo. It comes from philos, friend, and timi, honor. But it means so much more. Philotimo is a deep sense of integrity, of doing what's right, not for recognition, but because it's who you are. It is loyalty, empathy, courage, humility, and pride, all wrapped into one untranslatable idea. And maybe, just maybe, Philotimo is what guides us as professionals, as partners, and as people to use data not just for decisions, but for the good. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce Amshu, who brings deep real-world experience, expertise from inside the pharmaceutical industry. He'll take us further into how real-world evidence is being structured, scaled, and applied across complex, high-stakes environments, building directly on the themes we have just explored. Thank you. Oh, there's a poll on the screen.
Lakshmi, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
thank you.
yes.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Mark. So, with that, I welcome Mr. Amritanshu Kumar as a second keynote speaker, RWE Head, India Novartis. He is a seasoned RWD leader with 17 plus years of experience in HEOR, RWD, and healthcare analytics. He pioneered India's first healthcare data analytics team at Optum and currently leads RWE team as RWE Head India at Novartis, driving global initiatives. Welcome, Amritanshu.
Thank you so much, Lakshmi. And thanks, Mark, for the wonderful remarks about real world evidence overall. And it's been more than 15 years. And when I started off working on real world evidence, most of the organization did not have a real world evidence team actually. So it used to be HUR, which further evolved into real world evidence. So it's been a long, long journey, and let's go to the next slide. So Mark talked about growing role of real world evidence and how the real world data is converted into real world evidence. Go to the next slide. And what I'm going to focus now is how the landscape has changed and how it changed very, very rapidly. And I'm going to touch upon three major points, which are the trigger points of how it has changed and why it has changed. The first one is integrated evidence planning, which is central to all the change and acceleration that we are seeing in real world evidence. The second one is data collection and partnership. And the third one is AI and how AI is enabling the evidence generation part. Let's go to the next slide and look at each of them one by one. So, as I said, 15, 16 years back when I started off, most of the organization did not have a separate, discrete real world evidence team. And what used to happen was real world evidence used to support most of the time only phase four studies. And slowly and slowly it has moved and it has evolved. And then you had also real world evidence playing role for generating evidence or substantiating the price of the drug. And that is going to help in the reimbursement. The next step was that there are many safety and effectiveness study that's been done on real world evidence. But still, till this point of time, real world evidence used to come very, very late for the organization when it comes to the to a particular product. Okay, so what happened after that was there was a need realized for very, very early planning for evidence generation. And for that, most of the pharma organization realized that real world evidence not only can help in the phase four trials, but it can actually help in the efficacy, safety, and even in the designing the trial itself. But for that, you need very, very early planning. And for that, what you need is you also need uh, very early inputs from all your stakeholders, which is going to be regulatory authorities, which is going to be STH, which is going to be HCPs, and of course the patients and the hospitals. And why is that? Because along with medical affairs, this is going to also you need inputs from different departments. So what really happened now, and this is becoming central to most of the pharma organizations now, is you create a integrated evidence plan coming from different organization, different part of the organization, including the regulatory side, including medical affairs, including access, and including commercials. So at one point of time, very early, you create a single document which talks about all the unmet needs for all the products which is there in the pipeline for you. And you start creating for each of the unmet need, you start designing what is the evidence needs that you have, and where you are going to how and when you are going to do a project for that. And that central planning is called integrated evidence plan. Now, IEP has become now central to the organization, most of the pharma organization, along with the CDP. CDP is Clinical Development Plan, which was always be the central to the organization. But now, along with CDP, you also have IEP, Integrated Evidence Plan, which becomes very, very central to the organization, which means that you have very, very early real world evidence needs identified coming from different parts of the pharma organization, different departments. Okay, so that's integrated evidence planning. The second thing, let's go to the next slide. So because of early evidence planning, there is a tremendous need for real world evidence, because now not only you look for safety studies, you don't only do the phase 4 trials, but you also do studies for designing and different parts of the landscape. Now, second thing which has really changed the landscape for real world is, of course, you have much more data available to you, but the choices that is being available to all the pharma organization comes in different forms. So traditionally, and that is still be the case across the different organization, that you acquire a big data, big real world data, and you use that big real world data for doing in-house analytics. These data sources are generally huge, 100 million patients and of that size, claims data sources, EMR data sources, registries, and variable device is recent to it. But what that gives you is that you have greater control on these data sources because you have acquired the data. You can do customized analysis, you can do rapid iteration, and there is propriety of the organization. So this used to be traditionally how real world evidence used to be done. But but the question is that how much data that you can acquire, and the data that you have acquired, is that fit for your particular research question all the time. So you need more and more choices. Now, because you cannot acquire everything which is available, so one of the things that is offered now is marketplace. So in this case, you do not have to acquire all the data at once. You can have a central part of the data which is being acquired, and rest of the things you can buy on the go based on the project needs. So this is allowing access to diverse data sets. This can complement multiple analysis that you can do from different data sources, and you can have broader insights than the insights coming from only one data source. The third part is your federated data network. Now, Mark talked about OMOP and CDM. Now, common data models became the foundation for setting up federated data networks. So what really happened and what is happening most of the time is especially for the innovative pharma organizations, like what is you have many times for different rare disease, you have very small sample size data available, and you want to access the data coming across different regions uh, and countries where the data actually cannot flow out of the regions. So how do you work with that? So federated data network allows access to the data without data flowing out of the countries or region, but still you can use this data for generating real world evidence. The fourth one is really very, very recent, but this has become very, very prominent also. That it used to be the case that there used to be data vendors and data providers who used to give different pharma companies the data, but now more and more organizations do not have only data, but they are also offering analytics services along with data. Meaning that you do not have only data coming into you and then you remove the noise and everything and do the processing. In this case, you just say that, okay, this is our unmet need for my product, and this is the research question that I want, and they are going to tell you which is the best data fit for your research question, and they are going to give you the results or the actionable evidence very, very quickly. Um, Okay, so these are as you can see, the data collection and the partnership has moved very, very quickly, and that has really accelerated the evidence generation. Now, let's go to the next slide and touch upon a little bit more in detail federated data network. Now, federated data network, as I said before, that there are low sample size available for, especially in case of uh, rare diseases. And then there are many geographies where there are privacy concerns, and the data cannot flow out from these different geographies. So let's say you have source one, source two, source three sitting across three different geographies, which can be in the same country or different country, and which have different data regulations. Now, one approach would be that you contact each of them separately and work it out with them and do a project with them. But that is going to be having contracting in place with each of the data sources, looking at privacy concerns for each of the data sources countries. Uh, and then work it out. The other approach, which is the federated data network, and the first step here would be that you pool the data from different data sources, which might be in different format. First of all, so you apply something like a OMOP common data model so that all the data sources would come up with the same data, and then you create a layer in between where, or a board in between where all the data owners and they can sort of switch on, switch off which data should flow in, should flow out of the organizations, or which data should not flow out of the organization. You can have the option of not only sending the raw data to the pharma organization, but send the summary data to the organizations outside the organization to pharma organizations. Then you can also apply different filters based on the privacy concerns you have. So at the consumer level, you have pool data, one standardized pool data coming from multiple countries, multiple sources, which is meeting the GDPR guidelines, all their privacy concerns, and all the concerns. And then you have access to multiple source, multiple countries, multiple geographies data at one point of time, and you can now start looking at this data and start doing your evidence generation analysis project. This has become a trend, and this is becoming more and more prominent to have, or if I did a data network, there has been many projects going on to have a network like this, which can support multiple projects on one or multiple products. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. Now, the third one is AI-enabled platform for RWE analytics. I sort of touched upon this before, and here again, what the picture is clearly showing that again, each of the raw data is coming from each coming from different sources, and it might be having in different formats. So one thing that you can do is you can combine that all together and standardize all the data all together. Then you need a AI AI layer built on top of all these three data sources together. And then what it needs is only a click of a button, if you have a AI framework built in place, which will give you the insights that you're looking for. And it can be for one data sources or the other data sources or the third data sources, and you can actually combine the results. So in this, if you have invested enough in this, then you can it can suggest the fit for purpose data for your research question. It is going to really accelerate the evidence generation. It becomes really reusable, and you can do the analysis from multiple data sources and compare them and or validate them. So that has really where all the pharma organizations are now also investing to have a platform where you can do the analytics using data sources from multiple sources. Now let's go to the next one. And I think Mark talked about the journey for real world data to real world evidence. And here you can again see overall the process flow for evidence generation on a very top level. So you start on the topmost part of the slide. You start with identifying the evidence needs. Then you start looking for what is the best fit for your data, fit for purpose data. You do a feasibility assessment and come to one or two data sets where you want to do the analysis. Then you start planning that what is going to be your study design, what is your research question, what are your endpoints in some sort of protocol or analysis plan. Once that is in place, then you start executing the entire data source, entire data analysis part, and finally the dissemination of the results comes in. Now, if you want to invest as a pharma organization into Gen AI and accelerate the entire evidence generation, for each of them, you can have a combined process flow, which is again going to start from integrated evidence plan, which is going to give you the unmet needs. And then you what you do is one of the solution would be that you have a LLM engine sitting on top of multiple data sources, and a user can chat to different data sources and do a fit for purpose data analysis and feasibility assessment and give you the sample size coming from different data sources. So that way you can, in a matter of minutes, you can decide which data sources is the best fit. Then once you know the best data source, then again, the next step is protocol design. So in this case, if you build a large enough pool of previous analysis that's been done or on similar data sources or similar research question, you can again have a LLM based engine built on top of a big knowledge data bank, which is going to help you in design the entire protocol. So again, at least the first draft or second draft of the protocol you can easily design. You just give the research, this is our research question, and it will give you a draft protocol uh, based on the knowledge bank that is available. Now, once you have the data sources, you have the protocol design with you. The next step is AI-enabled platform, which I have just discussed in the previous slide. If you have invested in that sort of platform, then you just do a query, which would be a very, very simple query, and it will execute the same query on multiple data sources because you have all the data sources standardized. So the same query is going to be executed on multiple data sources, and it will give you the result and insights very, very quickly. Then the final one would be the communication or the dissemination of results. Again, if you have invested in a knowledge bank for all the reports and manuscripts and create a knowledge bank, and based on top of that knowledge bank, if you have a LLM based engine, you can chat to this LLM engine and ask them to generate a report looking at your analysis coming out from execution phase and looking out for the knowledge bank which is available with it. It is going to give you the report very, very quickly. So as you can see, if you have an integrated evidence plan in place and you have invested enough at different phases of the real world evidence cycle, and starting from investing in platform to building different knowledge banks and applying a LLM engine on top of these knowledge banks, you can really accelerate the entire evidence generation process. So with that, I'm going to take a pause and hand over back to Lakshmi, uh, and then we can work on the question. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Yeah. Thank you, Amritanshu. So, as you rightly mentioned, integrated evidence planning and federated data network are the strategic approaches which brings the data together to support the decision making. So, now I would like to welcome our third speaker, Dr. Anita Umesh from Genentech. So, Dr. Anita Umesh is from Genentech Data Standards and Governance Group. She holds a PhD in environmental toxicology and postdoc in the division of pulmonary and critical care medicine. She is a trained molecular biologist with an expertise in cardiovascular science and oncology clinical informatics. And she is currently leading Roche data tabulation efforts, and she develops advanced SDTM modeling strategies for complex oncology and molecular data. Additionally, she also co-leads the CDISC RWD lineage team, driving standards for real-world data. So, welcome, Dr. Anita. The floor is yours.
Can you, yep, thank you. Go to the next slide. So we're going to shift gears here. And we heard a lot about the data, real world data and how it's put together. We're going to shift gears and actually talk about the regulatory side. If you can move to the next slide. Over the last several years, the FDA has published a few guidances related to real world data. And there are a few key things that they stress in each one of them. First, in the guidance from December 2023, they say that sponsors are required to use the formats described in the study data technical conformance guide and in the data standards catalog as a standard for submitting real world data. Now, the standard that's currently in the FDA's data standards catalog is actually CDISC SCTM. So this means that even for submission of real world data to the regulatory authorities, in this case FDA, SCTM standards must be used for submission. Can you go to the next slide? And further, in guidance that just came out last year, about a year ago, July 2024, they talk about the importance of having reliability of this data. And when they say reliability, they talk about accuracy, completeness, and traceability of the data that's in the submitted package. So that means SDTM again. Can you go to the next slide? And in a couple of their other guidances put out in July 2018, as well as August 2023, they talk about the need to be able to have access to the source data. So they say things like all relevant information in the EHR pertaining to the clinical investigation must be made available to the FDA for review upon request. They say that patient-level data can be provided to the FDA and that the source data necessary to verify the real-world data must be made available for inspection as applicable. So that means that not only do they need data to be submitted in the submission package using CDISC SDTM, but they also need access to the source from which that data set came from. Can you go to the next slide, please? Further, they also indicate in their latest guidance from last year that they need to be able to verify the submitted data against its original source. So again, going back to the source real-world data, which would be things like pathology reports, registry, EHR claims, what have you, and that they need to be able to have access to medical review of records. Go to the next slide. So, what do we have today? What's the current state for traceability of data that's submitted to the regulatory authorities? As we all know, currently data submitted to the regulatory authorities is largely in the form of randomized controlled trials. And SDTM, of course, was built to support this. So we have on the bottom an annotated case report form and how fields from that case report form might end up as records within SDTM. And currently, because, of course, controlled trials are designed prospectively, the sort of the mapping is from source to target data model is generally either one-to-one or one-to-many, and can be traceable back from, by looking at the case report form. Can you go to the next slide? So essentially, the current state of traceability in the submission package is, again, the source clinical trial data to SDTM, which is generally a one-to-one or one-to-many mapping with mapping specs that can be provided at the variable or field level, at the within mapping specs. We have there's a define XML that is submitted to show metadata, and there's a study data reviewer's guide that's also submitted, and some programs and codes that are made available, though not necessarily as part of the submission package. So this is the current state, right? And if we need to submit data, real world data in SDTM so that the regulatory authorities can receive this, that means that this framework is what we also have currently for real world data. And can you go to the next slide? And as we heard earlier in the others from the other speakers, real world data, the input can come from many different sources. So for example, in the bottom, you'll see for one patient, you might have the fact that they have a hypertension coming from ICD-10 codes. For another patient, there might be a hypertension that's calculated based on vitals. It might also come from doctor's notes. So the submitted data package, or the SDTM data package, can be composed of information that's coming from many different sources. Can you go to the next slide? And so real world data, when put into this format, as we heard before, and I'll reiterate again, poses several different challenges because the source to target data not only has a one-to-one or one-to-many relationship, but it has a many-to-many relationship. And there's also a lot of data that is lost through transformations, whether it goes through a common data model and then to SDTM or directly from source into SDTM. And so it's clearly very difficult for the regulatory authority side to be able to verify data that ends up in SDTM back to from the source. So if you go to the next slide. So this is where we have a need to be able to express lineage of data that ends up in SDTM at a data point level. So this is not like at the variable level or data set level, but actually at the individual data point level. So it's like if you think of a table, it would be, you know, a specific cell within a table. Where did that data point in that cell come from? And so we need to be able to express this at the level of the coordinates from the source data that ends up in SDTM. So if you go to the next slide, please. So this is where this CDISC sub-team for real-world lineage, this is the reason why this team has been developed. And this team is, the project goal is to create a data exchange standard for lineage metadata that can be supplied alongside real-world derived SDTM, so that the data reliability that the FDA is asking for can be provided as so that real-world data can be used as evidence to support regulatory submissions. So this team, just to give a little bit of context, kicked off last year in July, right around when the last FDA guidance was released. And we have representation from, there's representation from pharma, CROs, tech companies, and other industries. Can you go to the next slide? And we have, there are a few requirements that the team is building the lineage standards on. And I'll just go through them point by point. There are a few use cases that the team has identified. So this team is trying to create lineage standards to satisfy those use cases, and I'll go through those use cases in the next slide. This needs to, again, be aligned with FDA guidances, and we want the lineage standards to be compatible with the current submission standards. So, and also have low barrier for adoption by sponsors and regulators, and also be able to accommodate the variety of sources of real-world data. So what does this mean? So compatible with current submission standards means that currently, and for example, low barrier of adoption means we are trying to extend this current metadata standards that is available within the data standards catalog, and this would be the define XML. And because as we know, new standards take a long time to be adopted by the FDA, and it takes a long time for things to land on that standards catalog. We go to the next slide. So the use cases that the lineage is going to be satisfying will be primarily focused on external control arms, pragmatic trials, prospectively collected real-world data via electronic data capture, and to a lesser extent, validation studies and natural history studies. You go to the next slide. And just to give sort of a snippet of what this effort looks like is we are taking data, like real world data from a source called Mimic, and we are taking this, cohorting patients for breast cancer and Parkinson's, converting it into SDTM, and then trying to identify components that need to be expressed so that the lineage metadata standards can be established so that it can be used as a submission, as part of the submission package for real world data in SDTM. So can you go to the next slide? And just as we kicked off last year, and currently the implementation is ongoing, and we will have a final initial delivery is, I think, projected for the end of this year, with maybe initial internal review maybe by the end of this year. So you go to the next slide. So this concludes this portion of the presentation. The guidances that I referenced within this talk is in linked in the slide. So, and with this, I'll hand it back to Lakshmi.
Yep. Thank you, Anita. So I think we had a very informative session about RWD lineage initiatives from CDISC, and I think we will go ahead with Q&A sessions. So audience, if you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A section, and we will be able to answer it. Thank you. So I also request all speakers to come on screen so that we will be able to take the questions and answer it. Okay, so let me start with the first question. This question is to Mr. Amritanshu. So, uh, do you believe RWE can eventually replace the certain phase of clinical trials, or it will always only play a supportive role? Mr. Anshu?
Okay, very interesting question, and I think as real world evidence is growing and evolving, there are many people uh, who are eager to know this. But my view is that the clinical trial is the gold standard for generating evidence, and it will remain the gold standard because you have complete control on the cohort, and and it becomes the fundamental to drug formation. So I don't see that real world evidence is going to replace uh, a clinical trial. But what I feel is clinical trial real world evidence is going to complement more and more on clinical trials. So what would happen more and more that you'll see that even the FDA and EMA would start asking additional evidence coming from real world data uh, for along with the trial evidence. You'll see that there would be more systematic and standardized way of doing a external control projects. You'll see that the way of doing real world evidence, generating real world evidence will become closer to how we have a standard trial data so that real world data becomes much more reliable and it can be used and relied upon for even for the approval process. But I don't see that this is going to replace trial.
Yep. Thank you, Anshu. So I also have one question to Anita. So, how are the regulatory bodies are currently viewing the role of RWE in drug approvals and label expansions? Anita, I request you to answer this question.
So currently, from what I see, it's usually supportive evidence or secondary. It's not used as sort of the primary evidence for marketing application approvals. So I agree with Anshu that probably it's not. It would be nice to be able to use more of this information as supported, but and the reason is this, right? Because for marketing approval, you're looking for efficacy and safety, but then real world evidence really is looking at more like efficiency. So it's the and you're not looking at mechanism of action through this. So if you're looking at that, the purpose of the two sets of data is different. So what it informs is also naturally it informs is different. So we're trying to so to answer your question again, I think it's currently seen more mainly as supportive evidence rather than the primary uh, evidence to make a decision.
Okay. So, how do you like there was one other question, like from a regulatory point of view, how important is transparency in study design and data lineage when we are working with RWE?
I mean, this is the crux of all the guidances that have been put out by FDA. It is critical, and I think even if there is a complete cohort match, a lot of times the evidence is not used as a primary decision maker because there is the fear of unknown confounders, right? And so, from a regulatory point of view, they want to be able to. I mean, this is the whole point of this lineage project is to be able to really trace back point by point where did these pieces of information come from and go all the way back to the source. And if this doesn't happen, I think there is not as much a level of trust that the regulatory authorities can put on this information. I don't know if the other speakers have anything to add to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would add, I think uh, it's the data lineage part is already covered in this talk. One of the things that we have not covered is from regulatory point of view, along with data lineage, which is absolutely critical, what is the focus is also on transparency on the study design. So you have frameworks like Harper and others where how the design and how the protocols should be made uh, are also coming out from different regulatory agencies. That means that all these designs can become reproducible. And sometimes I suppose that it should be transparent enough to all the regulatory agencies.
Yeah. So, yeah, good to know about that, Mr. Anshu and Anita. And I think we have one question from Mark. Like, what advice would you give to industry stakeholders looking to engage early with regulators for RW-based submissions? So, so I want Mark to start, and I want other speakers also to talk about it. Yeah.
I think that's a very difficult question to answer. In general, you can't start early enough, to get them involved. I mean, I think that's very simply said. I was still thinking about the previous subject, on real world data, and Anita brought it very well in her talk. It's like, you know, um, can you find the real evidence back into the single data points? If I'm correct, Anita, that's one of the issues that you brought up there. When I think about real world data, real world evidence, I think more in the line with, it helps the researchers, the developers, or whatever, yeah, to verify, what they have found until now, to keep it general, yeah, or to keep it even more general, to go and search for the unknown unknowns. And what I mean with that is, yeah, you can use, let's say, stochastic calculus, stochastic mathematics for it. It's like, okay, I've done my trial. Yeah, this is the outcome, but how can I be sure that I haven't missed anything? And I think with real world data and real world evidence, and please, Anita and Anshu, correct me if I'm wrong, yeah, it's a very good tool to have around to really figure out if you have missed anything, if there are some holes in the study. That's the line of thinking that I currently have with real world data, because it's, yeah, you see that within the digital, the image medtech, that they're using that a lot, to double verify, um, their image, how do you say that, algorithms to recognize something on an image. Does that make any sense, what I've said until now?
Yes, Mark. Yeah. Thank you. So, uh, Anshu, would you like to take it further?
Yeah, I think, okay, so I'll tell you what I feel that real world evidence initially, as I said, when it started, it used to only do the phase 4 trial. But slowly and slowly, the expectation is that RWE moves closer and closer to the trial for decision making. So, you have heard what Anita said, and I think transparency in study design and data lineage is foundational, absolutely foundational for decision making. So when it comes to regulatory side of it. But where real world evidence really is going to make a difference and which is becoming very, very prominent is along with the trial, which is the efficacy side of it, along with that, more in the clinical adoption side and on the access side. Because if you look at different pharma organization, even if you have produced a magic pill, let's say, but if it is not reaching out to the patients, if you do not have taken care of the access side of the product, then that is not very useful. And even after regulatory approval, that is not going to help if you have not worked out really well on the access side of it. And I'm not only saying about the reimbursement side, I'm also saying on the clinical adoptions. So your SCPs are not convinced with your own product, then it's going to be not very, very helpful for the patients. So one thing is that real world evidence, I feel that is real world evidence is very, very important when it comes to clinical adoption, which sometimes we undermine. Now, coming to the first part of it, uh, and I want to just touch upon that. And there are research going on and discussions going on the regulatory side, how you can become more and more transparent when it comes to real world evidence. So there are suggestions and recommendations. So I was talking about, have building a knowledge bank and using that knowledge bank. If you use AI, you can generate protocol, right? I think I was talking about that. Now, if you actually do that, you don't generally, generate protocol in the click of a button. You generate it bit by bit, section by section. Okay, so I really believe that in future it might actually become, and there are many research going on also on the governance side of it, on the pragmatic side of it, that what about having a common platform that's been shared while you are developing the protocol using all these AI platforms and tools. You develop a section and you hand it over to the regulatory authorities. Simultaneously, they can review each section. And then you take the feedback, live feedback from them. They will always have review. Uh, it's like you are simultaneously reviewing a Word document. Same way, if you have a platform and you can share your protocol and study design simultaneously with all the uh, regulatory agency, that adds really, really well to the transparency side of study design when it comes to the only the design part. I think, yeah, I just wanted to add that because that's been something that there are many pharma organizations which is working on that to have a system like that in place. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to hear, Anshu. Louis, would you like to talk about that? Louis?
Hi, good afternoon. I thought when the discussion was going on the maybe the convergence of clinical trial data and real-world evidence data, how it is coming together. And maybe it's because I'm a little bit more into the ISO health informatics and sitting at the table sometimes with the drug authorities. In the FDA, they refer to the 21st Century Cures Act, which already started the thinking about it on how real-world evidence could come into play, and that act was already there in 2016. It takes time, but I do believe over the years there is more consensus on how both clinical trial data and subsequent later real-world evidence data can be used for the benefit of patient safety. And maybe more recently, in the last few years in Europe, there's the Darwin EU initiative, in which Peter Rijnbeek from the Erasmus University in Rotterdam is a leading influencer in that space, where also the European Union is looking at a roadmap on how the EMA should embrace real-world evidence as well. So it's a hot topic. And I think both regulatory and industry alike should get their minds around it. And I think by initiatives as we are having here and sharing the minds can accelerate the awareness as well as the making the data flow faster for patient outcome. So that's just my 2 cents when I observe this topic. Thank you, Lakshmi.
Yep. Thank you, Louis. I think we have one more question. What advice would you give to professionals transitioning from traditional pharma roles into data and AI roles?
So, one more time, Lakshmi. I'm not sure
Yeah.
if acoustic came.
What advice would you give to professionals transitioning from traditional pharma roles to data and AI roles?
Roles.
Yeah.
I think that's the interesting of new technology coming in, I think it's a combination of you have the profession as the pharma professionals, and then you have the profession. Let's call them data scientists. Data scientists for now, yeah. But when I look back in my career, the years collecting gray hairs, you saw that in every stage, of technology evolving, yeah, new professions came in. Yes, you had some people that converted from, let's say, pharma to data science and AI, but I think there is also place for, let's call it, data stewards. I think that's a word that's been used yet a lot. Is that there is a new breed of professionals coming in that works very closely, yeah, with these pharma professionals, and that new group of people, or that new profession, yeah, is like I was taught, yeah, to bridge between business and technology, yeah, that they are bridging, between AI, new technologies, and the pharma professionals.
So maybe I can also add up to what Mark said. I am a pharma professional, or I am a pharmacist by graduation, but now I'm into the data engineering and data science, handling the real world evidence part. So how much we upskill ourselves will definitely help the professionals to transition themselves from any traditional roles to the upcoming uh, new insights that's coming in. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think one final question we can take is about in the Q&A section. Yeah. How do you tackle the challenge of ensuring data quality when working with fragmented real world data sources? So this is to Anshu and Anita. So how do you tackle the challenges of data quality with real world data, when especially when it is fragmented? Anshu, would you like to go first?
Okay, I think whether data is fragmented or it is not fragmented, whenever you are using real world data, you have to be careful that your analysis is not biased. You have to take care of all the biased. There needs to be a standard quality framework for all the real world data that's going to be used, which comes to different pharma organizations. And and the second, so many times you do not have data completeness matrices, which can be designed for different data sources, which takes care of the completeness of the data. Like, just to give you an example, if you're, let's say, only relying on a claims data source and you see that a person is diagnosed with a particular indication, but if you look for all the taste that he has gone for in last 2 years or so, you don't see a single test that he has gone for, which he should if he's been diagnosed with that particular condition. And all the screening. So you cannot rely only on one attribute. You need a complete 360-degree view for the patient to generate evidence. And keeping that in mind, you can have a uh, completeness matrices which can be designed for data sources. Most of the time, you'll find that these matrices would not show fantastic results for huge data sets. And so you start creating these targeted data sets. That's where, common data model and federated data comes in. And there, you'll see that the completeness actually grows exponentially. And so the traceability of how of the patient journey. So yeah, so I think that is one of the way of doing it. But the most important is that quality, completeness, and traceability should be used for understanding the fit for purpose data before doing any real world data analytics.
Yeah.
With that, I'll hand over to the expert, Anita.
Yeah. Anita, you're on mute.
Yeah, just to quickly add to that, there's always this unknown, right, with real world data. So, but one of the things that, you know, this is my personal view, is sort of being able to explain the reason behind your choices, because we can all make choices you can have, but there is when both sort of data model and data source is subject to human interpretation, we all do these things slightly differently, and that sort of explainability of why certain things are done in addition to what is done, I uh, I think would be very helpful. But again, that is my personal view, not my company's view or anything like that.
Yeah. So additionally, I would also say like data imputation techniques might also help in handling the fragmented data, especially when it is target. Even though we have the targeted data sources available, sometimes we see the fragmentation. So in that case, maybe the data imputation could be one of the technique which we can follow. Yeah. I think we are running short of time by 2 minutes. So I would like to thank my speakers, Mark, Mr. Anshu, and Dr. Anita. And on the summary, I would like to say like the evolving role of real world evidence is primarily focusing on the fragmented data, transforming the fragmented data into actionable insights through structured pipelines, federated data network, and AI powered platforms. And what's next from our end is like, yeah, as we were discussing, like we are going to come up with our next webinar on AI enabled OMOP compliant RWD platform, which will really showcase, like it's going to be a kind of demo where we will be able to showcase how the data has been handled in the AI powered platform. And additionally, it will also drive the integrated evidence planning across the functions, and it will also enable the cross industry collaborations for data standards. So let us and especially the concept will be around the federated data network. And so let's stay tuned for our next chapter. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks for your participation.